Paris, France. Midnight. The moment I stepped through the grand entrance of Le Dernier Goût, I knew something wasn't right. The air inside was thick with the scent of aged wine, seared meat, and something else I couldn't quite place. A rich, heavy aroma that lingered at the back of my throat. The restaurant was stunning. Vaulted ceilings, candle-lit tables, and waitstaff dressed in black. Elegant, silent, precise. I wasn't supposed to be here. I, Thomas Reed, was a food critic, not a celebrity, not a billionaire, just a man who wrote about food for a living. Yet here I was, at a secretive, invitation-only dining experience whispered about in elite circles. The invitation had arrived earlier that week. A single black envelope slipped under my hotel room door with only 3 words inscribed inside. Midnight. No talking. I had hesitated before accepting. This wasn't just another Michelin-starred event. This was different. Underground, private, forbidden. The kind of place where people paid for secrecy as much as they paid for the food. A hostess approached me, her dark eyes studying me carefully before she gestured for me to follow. Not a single word was spoken. I swallowed hard and walked past the other diners, their faces half hidden in the candlelight. There were about 20 of us, all dressed in our finest, men in sharp tuxedos, women in sleek gowns. Everyone was silent, focused on their plates as though the simple act of eating required complete concentration. No one acknowledged my arrival. The hostess led me to an empty seat near the center of the room. In front of me, a plate rested on the table, a single name tag beside it, Thomas Reed. I sat down, my pulse quickening. A waiter appeared, placing the first dish in front of me, a delicate amuse-bouche, an intricate combination of black truffle, foie gras, and something unnervingly red. I picked up my fork, hesitated, then took a bite. It was exquisite. Better than anything I had ever tasted. Rich, earthy, deeply complex. But something about the texture was wrong. I glanced at the other guests. No one reacted. They simply ate, each bite taken with quiet, almost ritualistic precision. The silence pressed down on me. The second course arrived, then the third. As the dishes grew bolder, rare meats, exotic spices, I noticed something that made my stomach tighten. A tiny, gold earring, half buried beneath a delicate cut of meat. I looked around the table. No one flinched. Swallowing hard, I carefully set my fork down. I had eaten here before. Not in this restaurant, but in others, in kitchens that prided themselves on rare delicacies. But this was different. The fourth course arrived, and my breath hitched. A single, delicate hand, expertly braised and plated with precision. And then I saw the ring still on the finger. I knew that ring. The ring caught the dim candlelight, its small diamond glinting like an accusation. My stomach twisted violently as I stared at it. I knew that ring. It belonged to Eloise Marchon, a fellow food critic. I had met her several times at exclusive tastings, always competing for the best stories, the best reviews. She was sharp, relentless, and never backed down from a challenge. But Eloise had been missing for weeks. Her last known location? Paris. A slow, creeping nausea spread through my body. I glanced up, scanning the room. No one reacted. The guests continued eating, cutting into their dishes with precise, practiced movements. Their faces were composed, blank, as if nothing about this was strange. How could they not see it? Or worse, did they already know? The waiter reappeared beside me, his expression unreadable. He held a bottle of deep crimson wine and poured it into my glass without a word. The liquid was dark, almost too dark. I needed to leave. I placed my napkin beside my plate and slowly pushed my chair back. The scrape of wood against the floor was deafening in the suffocating silence. A single set of eyes snapped toward me, then another, and another. One by one, every guest at the table turned their heads in unison, their gaze locking onto me. Watching. I froze, my pulse hammering in my ears. A waiter standing near the entrance reached into his jacket and with a slow, deliberate motion, turned the lock on the restaurant's only door. A sharp click. I had made a mistake. A cold hand gripped my shoulder. I jerked, nearly knocking over my wine glass. The hostess had appeared behind me, her fingers pressing down lightly, a silent command to sit back down. My heart pounded. I forced a tight smile and lowered myself back into my chair. Satisfied, she withdrew, her movements graceful as she returned to her post. The moment I was seated again, the other guests went back to eating as if nothing had happened. The air buzzed with unspoken rules, unspoken threats. The waiter placed the next dish in front of me. I didn't want to look. I didn't want to see what was on the plate. But my eyes betrayed me. A perfectly seared piece of meat, artfully plated with a drizzle of sauce. It could have been anything. Could have been. Then I noticed the scar. A thin white mark along the edge of the flesh. A scar I had seen before. On Eloise's wrist. My breath shuddered out of me. I lifted my gaze to the waiter standing beside me. His face was carefully neutral, his eyes dark and empty. But as he placed a fork beside my plate, his fingers brushed my hand for half a second. Something was there. A note. I swallowed hard and read the single word scrawled in hurried ink. Run. The word on the tiny slip of paper sent a cold shiver through my entire body. Run. I didn't move. I didn't even breathe. My fingers trembled as I curled the note into my palm, hiding it under the table. I glanced up at the waiter who had slipped it to me. He was already walking away, his posture stiff, his head slightly lowered as if he had just committed an unforgivable crime. He wanted me to escape. But how? The restaurant was locked. The guests were watching me. I could feel their eyes lingering just a second too long, their movements slow, deliberate. There was an unspoken rule here. Eat, obey, and do not question. I forced myself to lift my fork, pushing the food around on my plate. My stomach churned violently as I avoided looking at the scarred meat in front of me. If I hesitated too long, if I looked too alarmed, they would know. The man across from me, an older gentleman with neatly combed hair, dabbed his mouth with his napkin and stared at me. His expression was calm, but his eyes held something else. A quiet warning. I had two choices: eat, or become the next course. Swallowing hard, I forced a piece of the meat onto my fork. My hands were clammy, my grip slipping as I raised it to my lips. I couldn't do this. But then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw the waiter who had passed me the note. He was standing by the kitchen doors, his hand gripping a tray too tightly, his chest rising and falling with barely restrained fear. He gave me the slightest nod. He was telling me to play along. My heart hammering, I pressed the fork to my lips and let the meat barely touch my tongue before I swallowed it whole. My throat closed up in protest, but I kept my face neutral, my expression carefully blank. The man across from me gave a slight smile and went back to his own plate. The others stopped watching. For now. I clenched my fists under the table. I needed to get out of here. The waiter disappeared into the kitchen. If he was my only ally, I had to find a way to follow him. The next dish arrived, a small, ornate bowl of soup. Its steam carried an unfamiliar spice, something fragrant yet almost metallic. Another test, another chance to prove I belonged. I reached for my spoon just as I felt something brush against my foot under the table. A shoe. I went still. Then, a hand, gripping my ankle. Tight. Too tight. My body locked up as I forced myself not to react. I glanced under the table, but the shadows beneath were too deep, too dark. Someone was down there, hiding, waiting. The grip around my ankle tightened. My breath caught in my throat, but I didn't move. I couldn't. My hand stayed poised over my bowl of soup, my spoon hovering just above the steaming surface. If I reacted, If I so much as flinched, they would notice. The other guests were eating in synchronized silence, their faces empty, their eyes fixed on their plates. No one acknowledged what was happening beneath the table. Did they know? I risked a glance down. The space beneath the table was too dark, darker than it should have been in a room bathed in candlelight. My heartbeat pounded against my ribs as I forced myself to look. Then I saw it. A pale hand, not just gripping my ankle, but clawing at it. Fingers thin and bony, nails cracked, skin stretched tight over the knuckles. The grip wasn't just firm. It was desperate. Someone was under there. Trapped. The realization sent ice through my veins. I fought every instinct screaming at me to yank my foot away. Stay calm. Stay still. Don't let them know. I swallowed hard and dipped my spoon into the soup, bringing it to my lips as if nothing was wrong. Play along. The moment the spoon touched my lips, a new horror hit me. The taste. It was rich, thick, too thick. A blend of slow-cooked broth, heavy with marrow and something metallic. I forced myself to swallow. The hand around my ankle trembled, then released. A deep, sinking fear filled my stomach as I placed my spoon down and wiped my mouth with my napkin. Whatever was beneath the table had let go, but it hadn't left. My mind raced. If someone was down there, how long had they been there? And more importantly, why? The waiter who had slipped me the note reappeared, collecting empty plates from the table. His movements were practiced, smooth, but I caught it again, that tension in his shoulders, the barely restrained urgency in his steps. I had to get to the kitchen. My chance came when another waiter passed by, accidentally bumping into my chair. The movement sent my napkin slipping from my lap to the floor. An excuse. I exhaled sharply and bent down to retrieve it, my heart hammering as I tilted my head. Just enough to peer under the table. For a split second I saw them. Wide, bloodshot eyes staring back at me, a face gaunt and hollow streaked with sweat. Mouth gagged. Before I could react, a hand shot out and grabbed my wrist. A silent plea. "Help me." I gasped and snapped upright, nearly knocking over my soup bowl. The older man across from me raised an eyebrow, his expression mildly amused. "Something wrong?" he murmured, breaking the silence. My blood ran cold. A single sound, a single slip. And now, all eyes were on me again. Silence had been the rule from the moment I stepped into Le Dernier Goût, and now, the older man across from me had broken it. But he wasn't panicked. He wasn't afraid. He simply dabbed the corners of his mouth with his napkin, his gaze steady, almost amused. The room had gone still, forks hovering above plates, glasses frozen mid-air. The air itself felt suffocating, heavy with unspoken tension. Everyone had stopped eating, and they were all staring at me. I swallowed hard, my pulse hammering. I needed to say something, anything, to smooth over the slip, but no one else was speaking. Not the guests, not the waiters, not even the man who had just broken the rule. The only sound was the faint clinking of glass as the sommelier poured another round of wine, as if nothing had happened. I clenched my fists beneath the table. Was this a test? The hand under the table, the gagged, terrified face, the note warning me to run. And now, the deliberate break in silence. Why? The man across from me tilted his head slightly. His silver cufflinks caught the candlelight. "Not hungry?" he asked, his voice too casual. My breath hitched. Another rule broken. No one else reacted. The waitstaff continued their movements with eerie precision, clearing plates, refilling glasses, preparing for the next course. The guests returned to their meals, their attention drifting away from me, as if nothing had happened. I forced a smile, gripping my napkin so tightly my knuckles turned white. "Just pacing myself," I murmured, careful to keep my voice low. His lips curled slightly. Good. You wouldn't want to ruin your appetite. A threat, disguised as polite conversation. I held his gaze for a moment longer, then picked up my wine glass, if only to give my hand something to do. As I took a sip, I watched him. He wasn't like the others. There was an ease in the way he carried himself, a quiet confidence. Not a guest, not a servant, but something in between. Someone with authority. The waiter who had slipped me the note reappeared, setting a new dish in front of me. A perfectly plated steak tartare, its deep red flesh glistening under the dim light. I hesitated. That same metallic scent hit my nose, stronger now. The memory of the scarred meat from earlier clawed at my mind. I glanced back at the older man, but he had already turned his attention elsewhere, idly slicing into his dish with surgical precision. The waiter who had helped me lingered. His fingers lightly tapped the rim of my plate, once, twice, before he walked away. A signal. I gritted my teeth. If I wanted to get out of here, I needed to act fast, before I became the next course. My mind was racing. I knew two things for certain. This place wasn't just serving rare cuisine, and I wasn't meant to leave. The waiter had given me a signal. He was risking something to help me, and I couldn't ignore it. But how? The restaurant was locked, and any sudden movement would put every pair of eyes back on me. I took a slow breath, my fingers tightening around my fork. I needed to think like a critic. Dissect the moment. Look for the smallest flaw. The guests were eating. The waitstaff moved like clockwork. The only place with real movement was the kitchen. That was my way out. I had to get to the kitchen. I forced myself to lift a bite of the tartare to my lips, pretending to savor the texture. My stomach rolled violently as I tasted the raw meat. Too warm, too familiar. I swallowed hard, masking my revulsion. Then I did something reckless. I reached for my glass of wine and knocked it over. The red liquid spilled across the tablecloth, seeping toward the older man's plate. He sighed, mildly annoyed but not surprised, as if he had seen this kind of mistake before. "Excuse me," I murmured, standing. No one stopped me. The moment my feet touched the floor, I felt the tension in the room shift. The waitstaff noticed, but they didn't act. The other guests barely looked up, as if trained not to interfere. Only one person truly reacted, the waiter who had warned me. He was already moving, heading toward the kitchen doors. I followed, walking with careful, measured steps. Not too fast, not too slow. I reached the entrance just as he slipped through. One deep breath. Then I pushed through the doors and stepped into hell. The kitchen was enormous, a maze of stainless steel counters, boiling pots, and searing flames. The air was thick with the scent of butter, blood, and something else. Something rotting. Cooks moved in precise mechanical motions, knives chopping, flames roaring, meat sizzling. But there was no conversation, not even the usual urgent shouting of a fast-paced kitchen. They were silent. The waiter was waiting for me near the far counter, his back turned as he adjusted a plate. "Don't react," he murmured, keeping his hands busy. "They'll notice." My throat felt dry. "What is this place?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he gestured subtly to the walk-in freezer. My pulse jumped. Number. Not there. But he gave me a look. "You need to see this." I moved toward the door. My fingers trembled as I gripped the handle. The cold metal sent a shiver through my body. I pulled it open, and my world collapsed. Inside, hanging from hooks like cuts of beef, were people. The cold hit me first, a sharp bite against my skin, but it wasn't just the temperature that made me freeze in place. It was them. Rows of bodies hanging from metal hooks like slabs of meat. Their arms dangled lifelessly, skin pale and stretched tight over their bones. Some were missing limbs, others carved open with precise incisions. The air was thick with the metallic scent of blood, mixed with something else, something rotten. My stomach twisted violently. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't even scream. The waiter shut the freezer door behind us, sealing us inside. The dim fluorescent light buzzed above, flickering, casting shadows on the faces of the dead. Then I saw her, Eloise. Her body hung near the back, her head tilted to the side, as if she were merely sleeping. Her once bright eyes were glassy, unseeing. And her wrist, the same one that had worn the ring in my dish, was gone. My legs buckled, and I caught myself against a metal shelf, bile rising in my throat. I tried to warn her. The waiter whispered, his voice barely audible over the hum of the freezer's vents. I turned to him sharply. My mouth felt dry, my heart hammering against my ribs. What the hell is this? My voice shook. His expression was blank, but there was something underneath it. Fear. It's what they pay for. I stared at him. What? He swallowed. The guests, the people out there, they know. They don't come for the food, Thomas. They come for the experience, the exclusivity. They pay for what no one else can have. I felt sick. They're eating. He nodded once, as if saying it aloud would make it worse. You weren't supposed to be here. They don't invite critics. They invite clients. I shook my head violently. Then why did they let me in? He hesitated, then looked at me. Really, looked at me. You haven't figured it out yet? He said quietly. Thomas, you're the last course. The last course. The blood drained from my face. It all made sense now. The invitation, the assigned seat, the final dish with my name tag on it. They weren't feeding me. They were feeding me. To them. My whole body went cold. I had to get out. I turned toward the freezer door, but the waiter grabbed my wrist, his grip firm. Not yet, he whispered. If they see you panicking, it's over. I swallowed hard, trying to keep my breathing steady. What do I do? His eyes flicked to the far corner of the freezer, where a second exit door led to the alley outside. Hope sparked in my chest. But before I could take a step, the main freezer door suddenly swung open, and standing there blocking the exit was the older man from the dining room. Smiling, the older man stood in the doorway, his sharp eyes scanning the scene. The freezer light flickered above him, casting long shadows across the hanging bodies. He wasn't surprised. He wasn't horrified. He was smiling, like he had been expecting this. I went rigid, my heartbeat slamming against my ribs. Think, Thomas. Think. The waiter beside me was completely still, his fingers digging into my wrist in a silent warning. Don't move. Don't speak. Don't react. The older man exhaled slowly, as if savoring the moment. Thomas, he murmured, his voice smooth, practiced. I was beginning to think you weren't enjoying your meal. I forced my expression into something neutral, casual. Quite the selection, I managed, though my throat was dry. His smile widened. Yes, we do pride ourselves on our unique offerings. He took a step inside. The freezer door slowly creaked shut behind him, trapping us, my hands clenched into fists. I had to get to the exit. The second door, the one the waiter had pointed out, but the older man was in the way. Tell me, Thomas, he continued, pacing slowly between the hanging bodies. His fingers trailed along a frozen limb, the casual gesture making my stomach twist. Do you know what makes the final course so exquisite? I swallowed hard. No, I lied. His gaze flicked to me, amused. Fear. A pause. See? An animal knows when it's being hunted, he explained, stepping closer. It releases chemicals, adrenaline, stress hormones. It ruins the flavor. But a human in denial? He chuckled. That is a delicacy. I fought the urge to run. If I bolted, he would know. If I made a wrong move, he would stop me. So I did something else. I played along. I exhaled slowly, shaking my head as if disappointed. "Well," I muttered, "that's unfortunate." The older man raised an eyebrow. I shrugged, shifting my weight slightly toward the freezer exit. I was hoping for something more refined, a bit more sophisticated. But if it's just a gimmick, he laughed, a deep, rich laugh. "Oh, Thomas." He shook his head, taking another step forward. Closer. "You truly are a critic until the end." His voice was calm, but his eyes were watching me too closely. I was running out of time. The waiter beside me barely moved, but I felt his fingers twitch. A silent signal. Now. I didn't hesitate. I lunged toward the freezer door, shoving past a metal cart of trays. It crashed to the ground, the sound echoing through the small space. The older man reacted fast. Too fast. His hand snatched my jacket, yanking me backward. I stumbled, my shoulders slamming into a hanging carcass. Then the waiter moved. He grabbed a meat cleaver from the nearby counter and swung. A sickening crack. The older man screamed. I didn't wait to see what happened next. I ran. I sprinted toward the freezer's back exit, my breath coming in sharp gasps. The older man's scream still rang in my ears, but I didn't look back. The waiter, my only ally in this nightmare, had bought me a chance. I wasn't going to waste it. My hands fumbled against the cold metal handle. Locked. No. Panic surged in my chest as I yanked at it again, harder this time. The door wouldn't budge. This was planned. There was no easy way out. A sound behind me. Footsteps. I spun around just as the older man lunged. His face was twisted in rage, his sleeve soaked in blood where the cleaver had struck him. But he didn't slow down. His strength was terrifying, unnatural, like a predator refusing to let its prey escape. I ducked just in time. His fist grazed my ear, slamming into the metal door behind me with a sickening crack. I bolted sideways, weaving between hanging bodies as he recovered. The waiter was still gripping the cleaver, panting, his hands slick with sweat. He hadn't run. He wasn't leaving without me. "This way," he hissed, grabbing my arm and pulling me toward the storage shelves lining the wall. He reached for something, a set of keys, hidden in a small metal box. He fumbled with them, hands shaking. The footsteps were getting closer. I grabbed a hanging meat hook from a workstation nearby, my fingers slick with cold sweat. I turned just as the older man rounded the corner. His eyes locked onto me, wild and hungry. He charged. I swung. The hook dug into his shoulder. He let out a strangled grunt, but he didn't stop. He barely flinched, his hand wrapped around my throat, slamming me back into a rack of knives. I choked, struggling against his grip. His fingers tightened. "Fear ruins the taste, Thomas," he murmured. "But desperation, that's perfect." I clawed at his wrist, my vision blurring. My lungs burned. Then, a metallic click. The freezer door unlocked. The waiter grabbed me, yanking me away from the older man's grip. I gasped, stumbling forward as he threw the door open. Cold night air. Freedom. I didn't think, I just ran. The alley was damp, narrow, the city lights of Paris flickering beyond the rooftops. My legs screamed in protest, but I didn't stop. The waiter was right behind me, slamming the door shut, locking it from the outside. Then we kept running. Behind us, from inside the restaurant, came the sound of pounding fists, and a voice, muffled but furious. "You can't run forever." I didn't look back. I didn't stop. I just ran. The streets of Paris blurred as I ran, my breath ragged, my heart hammering against my ribs. My legs felt like lead, but I couldn't stop. Not now. Not when I knew what they were capable of. The waiter, my only ally, kept pace beside me, his face pale with exhaustion. The sound of our footsteps echoed against the cobblestone alleyway. Behind us, the pounding on the freezer door had stopped. They weren't chasing us. Not yet. We emerged onto a larger street, the glow of street lamps making everything feel too bright, too normal. Cars hummed past. People laughed from outdoor cafes, oblivious to the nightmare I had just escaped. I bent over, hands on my knees, trying to catch my breath. "What now?" I gasped. "We go to the police?" The waiter exhaled sharply, shaking his head. "And tell them what? That an exclusive restaurant is serving its guests human flesh? That they were about to kill a food critic as the final course?" He let out a bitter laugh. "Who do you think owns the police here?" My stomach twisted. He was right. The kind of people who dined at Le Dernier Goût weren't just wealthy. They were powerful. And powerful people buried their secrets well. "We have to do something," I insisted. "We can't just—" A sharp ring cut through the night. I jolted, realizing it was my phone. My phone. I hadn't even thought to check if I had it. My hands shook as I pulled it from my pocket. No service, but the call was still coming through. Unknown number. I hesitated. Then slowly, I pressed the answer button and lifted it to my ear. Silence. Then, a slow, deliberate breath. "You should have stayed for dessert, Thomas." The voice was calm, composed. The older man. My blood ran cold. "Paris is a big city," he continued, "but not big enough. You see, the meal isn't over. You walked away before the final course." I swallowed hard, my grip on the phone tightening. "I'm not your final course." A soft chuckle. "A critic always questions the menu, but in the end everyone eats what's put in front of them." A pause. Then, "You'll come back, Thomas, one way or another." Click. The line went dead. I stood there, frozen, my mind screaming at me that this wasn't over. I had escaped, but I hadn't won. The waiter was watching me carefully. Who was it? I forced myself to pocket the phone, my hands still shaking. No one. We didn't speak after that. We just kept walking, disappearing into the night, away from the glow of the streetlights, away from the place that had almost swallowed me whole. But I knew the truth. They would find me again. And next time, I might not make it out.